Welcome to the Gus Alva Perspective, a videocast that's aimed at embracing gratitude and abundance over the mindset of scarcity and fear, which abounds at the present time. The purpose of this videocast is to inspire individuals to give advice from a medical point of view, but also to help people rethink things uh, the way that they've been, operating with certain topics. The topic that I'm going to touch on right now is forgiveness, and believe it or not, this actually has deep impact on all of us. Think about this. Uh, have you ever had an instance in which you were holding a grudge and you weren't forgiving other people? Did you think that that might actually come back and hurt you? Ultimately, that's exactly what happens because not forgiving can have both physical and mental consequences that impact the individual's overall well being. And being a medical professional, it's always a good idea to take a look at some of the factors or some of the things that we might be able to control as opposed to those things that we cannot. But, you know, if we take a look at some of the salient issues that attach themselves to forgiveness, I'm going to go through 7 different items that I think are pertinent for us to think about. The first one is mental health or mental health issues. I describe right now that holding on to grudges and harboring resentment is a poison that actually creates a lot of toxicity within us. It can contribute to the development or even the exacerbation of various mental health problems. This includes depression, anxiety, anger issues, and chronic stress. Unfortunately, what we see with each one of these things is, a consumption of mental energy. These things ultimately lead to emotional distress and a reduction in our overall quality of life. The second point that I'd like you to ponder upon is the fact that we increase our stress levels when we're holding on to poison internally. A constant state of stress is really problematic. The ongoing anger, the bitterness, and the negative overall emotions that are associated with not forgiving can trigger physiological responses. And it's interesting, but our brains can make our bodies do multiple things. And this could include elevated heart rates, increased blood pressure, and the release of stress hormones like cortisol, as I've addressed in previous videocasts. The prolonged exposure to stress has detrimental effects on physical as well as mental well-being. Now, the third point that I'd like you to consider is a weakened immune system. And ultimately, we want to make sure that our immune system, our army that we have within us, is at the ready all the time. But chronic stress that results from unforgiveness can weaken the immune system. It makes individuals more susceptible to different illnesses and infections. It compromises the body's ability to fight off disease. Ultimately, this leads to vulnerability and a slower overall healing process, which we definitely don't want. Let's take a look at the fourth point because it resides along the lines of our main pump in our body. There's an increased risk of cardiovascular problems when people don't forgive. Unresolved anger and hostility have been linked to an increase of cardiovascular issues. This includes high blood pressure, heart disease, and heart attacks, which obviously negatively impact heart health. There's a fifth very important variable, and that is what happens with interpersonal relationships. By being a grudge holder, this strains the relationships that we are trying so desperately to keep together with others. It can create a cycle of conflict, distance, and emotional barriers, which ultimately lead to broken relationships, isolation, and a lack of social support. Being bitter has a lot of uh, negative correlates that ultimately impact people quite badly. The inability to forgive can prevent the growth of healthy and meaningful connections with others. So we should be mindful of these things. There are 2 more things that I'd like you to ponder upon. The sixth is a reduction in emotional well being. By not forgiving, we end up trapping ourselves in a negative emotional state. by preventing forgiveness. We prevent ourselves from experiencing happiness or peace or emotional healing. And this ultimately prevents us from moving forward and finding emotional closure when that closure can actually have a healing propensity for us. The last thing that I'd like you to think of, as you rightfully guessed, is a decrease in psychological resilience. Being a psychiatrist, this is one of the areas that I oftentimes end up seeing a fair amount. By not forgiving, individuals may struggle to cope with adversity, setbacks, and future conflicts. So, the overall lack of forgiveness can hinder personal growth, resilience, and the ability to bounce back from difficult situations, which ultimately we all face. To wrap things up in a very cohesive manner, we need to think that forgiveness is a rather complex process. It takes a strong individual to be able to forgive. None of us is perfect. And we need to consider that individuals require support and guidance to work through their emotions and reach a place of forgiveness, so long as, again, an affront was uh, not necessarily so overt that it can't be forgiven, right? Seeking therapy, counseling, or engaging in forgiveness practices can be beneficial for those individuals that struggle with forgiveness and its associated consequences. But ultimately, as we saw, there is a rationale and a reason for being able to pursue this very trait of uh, having kindness and being able to move beyond uh, an affront that we may feel cannot be forgiven. With that, I thank you very much for joining us on the Gus Alva Perspective. Interesting themes because they affect all of us as individuals, as human beings within a society. And there are many ways of correcting problems so long as we are cognizant of conduits that can help us in that recovery process. Once again, thank you for joining us on the Gus Alva Perspective. Have a phenomenal rest of the day. Thank you.